Hello and welcome to the Actuary podcast, produced on behalf of the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries, the IFOA. I'm John Watkins, a financial journalist and, as ever, your podcast host. We're bringing you our 12th episode now. To find all our past episodes, visit and subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you can also check out the Actuaries series of informative videos. Today, we are talking to migration expert Madeline Sumption, actuarial academic Aisha Arik, who is in Australia, and IFOA council member Masimba Zata. First of all, we've got Madeline Sumption dialing in to speak to us remotely, and she was recently interviewed in the Actuary's July-August issue. Madeline, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. The Migration Observatory, which is part of the University of Oxford, was created 15 years ago now, and you've worked there for most of that time. So can you start by telling us what it does and what prompted its establishment?
Well, the goal of the Migration Observatory is to try and provide a trusted source of information. Immigration policy obviously is incredibly contested debate, very divisive. And so our goal is to just try and provide data and evidence that everyone can trust. When we were initially set up, actually, a lot of the official data that were provided from the Home Office and the Office for National Statistics were very confusing. The communication of them wasn't very good, and it was quite difficult to find them. And so initially, part of it was just providing a sort of clearinghouse for the data so people could find it. I would say those data producers now, they have upped their game a little bit. I still would say that our website is more accessible than the government producers. But what we do now a lot is also provide sort of interpretation of how to understand the statistics. What does that mean for immigration policy? But without making any recommendations at all, because that's really important to our remaining impartial, is that we don't tell people what they should think. We just tell them, these are the questions and this is what the data says.
Yeah, and talking about your specific role as the observatory's director, and considering those points you just made, is it more a research-based role or a communications-based role, or a combination of the two?
It's a combination of the two. What we're trying to do is take the research that is available. We do additional research and data analysis ourselves, and then we try and communicate, what does this mean for public policy? What does this mean for people who are interested in immigration? And a lot of what we do then also involves taking studies maybe that other academics have produced and then applying it in a new case. So something like small boats coming across the channel, for example. There's a lot of research on how people claiming asylum, which is what most small boat crossers do. How do they make those decisions? Why do they come to countries like the UK? What kinds of policies have an impact on their decisions? So we will sort of gather together research from other settings and then say, okay, this is what we think we can say about that topic.
Yeah, migration is a very politically charged topic in many countries, not just the UK, and misjudgments and preconceptions abound. As an authority in academia who advises the government, are you distanced from the more emotive edge of the debate? And why do you think it has become such a hot potato?
Mm. I mean, yes, I distance myself personally from those emotional conversations. We're not moral philosophers, so we're really looking at, okay, here's a policy. This is what the impacts are going to be. Sometimes those might be humanitarian impacts. Sometimes they might be economic ones. But we don't get into the sort of emotional side of what should the UK be like as a society, which ultimately is what a lot of these debates about immigration policy are about. I think in terms of why it's so divisive, I think, obviously there are many policy areas that are controversial. I think immigration is particularly divisive because it's all about people. And so it gets to the heart of this question of, who belongs in our society and who doesn't, who is welcomed and who is not welcomed. And when it's really about people, I think a lot of moral judgments become part of the debate. It's not just a technical thing of like, oh, well, what will be good for the economy? That it gets to discussions about culture and society, and so I think people are naturally very interested in it, and they have quite reasonably strong views.
Yeah, it's a complex area to study, is with many drivers, as you stated in your interview with us in the July-August issue of the magazine. So how do you source your data? How reliable is it? And how helpful is it to look at what other countries are doing in this area?
Yeah, on the data, we use a lot of government data.
Mhm.
They obviously are collecting a huge amount of data through the immigration system itself. So actually, most of the official estimates of immigration and emigration are now created from Home Office records from when they grant someone a visa and then they see them cross the border. So we're quite reliant on the government. We obviously have our critiques of those data and we see that there are gaps. And so sometimes we will explain to our users, this is the official estimate, but be aware we're not as confident about this bit as that bit. British citizens, for example, we are not at all confident currently on the estimates of the numbers of British citizens coming in and out of the country because of how they're collected.
Mm.
We sometimes do collect our own data as well. So we have a longitudinal survey with Hong Kongers who've left Hong Kong and are on the special visa scheme that the government set up for them. And we've done some other data collection, but a lot of it is relying on government data. And then in terms of your question on other countries, you have to be quite careful with comparisons to other countries because often the context is very different. So, for example, we have these debates at the moment about Denmark, and some people say, "Oh, well, Denmark did this, so we should do it in the
Mhm.
UK because Denmark restricted their asylum system and they had fewer applicants." Now, it's possible that similar policies might have an impact in the UK, but there are also things that are different. The UK is inherently a much more attractive destination than Denmark ever has been for asylum
Mhm.
seekers, for example, and there are many other differences. So I think it's very useful to learn the lessons from other countries, but we also have to be cautious that something that if someone does something in a country with a different context, it won't have the same impact in every place.
Yeah, that makes sense. You studied languages at university, but describe yourself now as a data and statistics evangelist. Actuaries regularly have to decide how much to present raw facts versus sort of storytelling and bringing the story to life. Where do you stand on this with your work? And is it hard advising policymakers who perhaps might want to hear a particular message or a particular side of a story?
I think the storytelling piece of it is very important, not
Mhm.
necessarily in terms of getting into the emotional side of storytelling, which is not what we're about. But I think that it's very easy for people to get overwhelmed with data, especially if you're looking at people sort of in the policy debate or people reading newspaper stories. And so just trying to pull back a little bit and say, what is actually important here? What is going on? What is the trend? How reliable, is that story? I think is very important. So I'm not a big fan of sort of disembodied,
Mm.
just show the raw data and understanding will emerge. I think often understanding doesn't emerge. And that actually people need some, probably not the actuaries, I'm sure, who are listening to this, but a lot of people out there, some newspaper readers and so forth, will need some guidance on how to interpret them.
After nearly 20 years of studying migration, you've written your first book for general consumption, which came out a few months ago. It's called What is Immigration Policy For? Tell us a bit about the book and what it is for.
Yeah, so it starts from the premise that immigration policy is very divisive and people are often really unhappy with the outcome. And I think there's sometimes a narrative in public debate that if only politicians just had the political will to do the right thing, insert, whatever policy program I might happen to agree with, then trust would emerge and everyone will be happy. And what I'm doing in the book is explaining why it's much more complicated than
Mm.
that and why it's so difficult to produce an answer that everyone can agree on. And the core reason for this is that immigration policy is not just for one thing, it is for several different things, right? So there are economic goals, there are humanitarian goals, there are social, cultural goals, national security. And all of these things, when they go into the pot and get mixed together, you get a problem because they will often conflict. And so one of the key examples of this is looking at policy towards refugees. Now,
Mhm.
from a humanitarian perspective, many people want to be generous to refugees before and after they arrive and provide a welcome for them. However, it is also costly welcoming refugees. We're talking about groups of people who often really struggle in the labour market, have very low employment rates, low earnings if they are able to get a job. And so over the course of their lifetimes, there's actually a considerable fiscal cost of having refugees. And so this immediately sets up a trade-off between the economic and the humanitarian goals. And there are many other examples like that. And I think reasonable people will disagree on exactly how to strike the balance. And so what I'm trying to do in the book is not say, this is the way to solve all of the problems. It's not a book of solutions. It's really a book framing the questions and then trying to provide the evidence that will help people come to a judgment themselves of what they think would be a sensible way of addressing these issues.
Yeah, sounds great. Looking ahead, where do you see migration going in terms of both the sort of global trends and the debate around migration?
Well, I think the debate about migration is not going anywhere anytime soon. I think if you look at in the UK, for example, we have some really difficult issues that the government is grappling with that don't have easy solutions. So something like people crossing in small boats, is very visible. People understandably really care about it. A lot of the policy tools that the government has at its disposal are just don't work, frankly. The UK is very reliant on other countries like France. France doesn't necessarily want to do what might be in the UK government's interest on this. So I think that those kind of tensions and the difficulty of implementing immigration policy mean that the debate is not going to go away anytime soon.
And at the start of your career, you moved from the UK to the US, where you studied and worked for about a decade. What did it feel like to be a migrant yourself in that situation? And did your personal experience shape your approach to your work today at all?
Yeah, I was there I was a student, and then I was on a work
Mm.
visa in the US, and so I did naturally take an interest in those aspects of the process, and you get obviously a window into the specifics. There was sometime, a lot of the evidence actually shows that people on high skilled work visas are the most economically beneficial, and sometimes maybe it was a little bit embarrassing saying that because I didn't want to make it sound like what the real the economist, the consensus is that there should be more people like me in the country. So that obviously, creates an interesting dimension to it. But ultimately, I think most of what I think about immigration policy is not really informed by personal experience. I'm a data nerd. I like the evidence, and I think. And the anecdotes are very helpful for understanding the kinds of things that can happen, but obviously they don't give you any sense of scale. And so ultimately, the statistics is what I like to focus on most.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. Our last question from us. In another world scenario, if you hadn't gone into migration, and having mentioned there that you're a data nerd, what might you otherwise have wanted to study or go into?
I was always interested in public policy. I think
Mhm.
the jigsaws, are very it's a sort of interesting jigsaw puzzle understanding, what impact do policies have? How can you predict that? Public policies are basically about governing people, and people don't always behave in the way that the models suggest that they're supposed to. So, there were many other policy areas I was interested in. I sort of fell by accident into migration policy and then, found it very interesting, and so that's where I've stayed.
Well, Madeline, it's been a fascinating talk through your work and some of the issues around migration that we're seeing at the moment. So, thanks so much for sharing that with us.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Madeline, for giving us your time and your expert insights into the hot topic of migration right now. And do please remember to read the interview with Madeline in the May-June issue or online at theactuary.com. Our next guest is IFOA prize winner Aisha Arik, an academic who's dialing in from Sydney in Australia. Aisha, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for hosting me, John. It's a great pleasure to be here.
No, it's our pleasure. So you're an actuarial academic at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, moving there
Yep.
relatively recently after 7 years in Scotland, where you were a researcher at Heriot Watt University. That's a big change in location and, dare I say, weather. So how are you finding it over there now?
Well, by nature of the academia, we are expected to be mobile, but this was indeed a big change for me. It's really interesting actually how much weather could impact people's sort of daily lives and behaviors. In Sydney overall, you just see all these people with more relaxed and casual energy. They are often quite open and positive. There's this easy smile. But I still miss Scotland there. So it is a country with a lot of character and strong weather, as we know. And I think once you get past the initial shock of weather, you just sort of see how very warm and kind Scottish people are. So it definitely became a second home
Wow,
for me.
that's
So.
that's really nice. And what do you love about your subject? And as a senior lecturer, what do you love about the teaching side of things?
Well, senior lecturer is sitting between assistant and associate professorship in Australia. So it is my current contract is combining both research and teaching, which is quite nice because you can, well, they can feed into each other. So that is actually cool. Um, what I like about my subject, well, I have always liked numbers, the precisions of numbers. They almost always tell a story. If you just look at closely, you see different patterns, and those patterns could tell you a story. And I like thinking of actuaries as storytellers. So in my subject, I am mostly focusing on just health, inequalities in health, and how we can just help community or people is in the industry. So, and then this somewhat makes everything more meaningful.
Some of your recent collaborative work has looked at cancer data in the UK, developing a modelling framework for major cancer types and looking at socioeconomic disparities and the impact of COVID on breast cancer. There have been a few articles on that in the Actuary magazine. But tell us a little bit about why you have such a focus on cancer, and are there some headline insights that you can share with us now?
Um, and the professional reason is like cancer has become such a big, prevalent, and important global risk overall. And for the insurance and actuarial profession overall, it's a major driver of claims in, say, for example, critical illness insurance. And together with ongoing medical advancements, these improvements in screening and innovative treatments, I think we are likely to see more changes in cancer and survival outcomes there. So I think all this is just making it relevant as a research questions like we need to know what is waiting us in the near future when it comes to cancer, what type of drivers are emerging there and what will be the trends there. And on top of that, there's also a significant trend in cancer incidence below age 50. So this particular age group is also quite relevant to our profession. This is our insured population. So it really is interesting. And from a modeling perspective, cancer is quite a complex risk. And different cancer types behave quite differently. And then there are significant socioeconomic differences depending on type. Um, and the risk itself is continuously evolving. So, as a topic, it is quite fascinating to just look at and analyze.
Yeah.
And on a more personal level, um, cancer happened to affect my family quite deeply. So, I actually, so we as in the family, like lost my grandfather, my aunt, and my uncle
Wow.
to this disease. And I just observed it as a young adult. So these things sort of left some lasting impression, especially my uncle, because he was at the age of 38 when we lost him. So I guess when the opportunity did rise when I was doing my postdoctoral research, so it felt quite special to look into this risk and somewhat to talk about it, if not from a medical perspective, is my family hoped at some point, but from a population risk level perspective.
Yeah, I can understand that's very personal to you. One of your papers exploring cancer insurance pricing won the IFOA's latest Peter Clark Prize. Congratulations on that. What was the paper about, and does winning this recognition mean a lot to you?
It is such a prestigious award, and both my collaborators and I felt incredibly honored to be the recipient of the recognition. So it genuinely came as a very nice surprise to all of us. It has been a hard work, I must tell. I truly love my research, and that particular research was on cancer pricing in breast cancer context. I think in general, when I engage with a question, I become curious, quite curious about where it might lead, and I still get genuinely excited when the first set of results sort of emerging, perhaps too excited at times. Um, but that said, research can also be quite long process as we experience with the particular research, and it can be deflating at times. So in fact, during our work on the COVID impact on breast cancer mortality, so and the related models while developing those, there was a setback. So we realized almost after a year that some of the results and model itself were not quite behaving as we hoped for. And I still remember Angus, one of my co-authors, just sort of um, explained this to us in his very usual, very calm, collected way. Well, I just personally needed some um, meditation sessions to get over with it. So what I'm trying to say is, um, well, after that incident, for example, we spent another year to just put things into perspective, redesigning and calibrating things. So I think this award represents something important about research itself. So it is not always perfect, and it takes a lot of time, patience, calibration, and resilience to finish a good, high quality research. So not every stage is enjoyable, but it's really worth every effort to put in, especially when you just have a recognition like this.
Yeah, well, the award is great recognition of that. So congratulations again on that.
Yes. Thank you.
Where next will your research take you, do you think, Aisha? Are you working on something interesting at the moment?
I actually am working on something interesting. So at the moment, together with another colleague at CNSW, I'm finishing a project with C3 in Zurich. So we began by examining mortality improvements and excess mortality trends there across different socioeconomic groups in England, as a matter of fact. And now we are working on our second paper with the same team on a new model we developed, talking about how to capture long-term trends, temporary fluctuations, and unexpected shocks in mortality settings. There has been really interesting, nice project with amazing new collaborators. And currently we submitted another research grant. This is in the final phase. So it is about, and this is with a couple of colleagues at UNSW again. So we'll be focusing on mental health risk trends and the rising claims to talk about how we can help as insurance industry. So how we can come up with some solutions there to help people. So if it can become successful, passing through the final stage as well, this can become a new nice direction for us. And later this year, I'll be applying for a new cancer project. It will be an interdisciplinary research. The idea there is to bring behavioral, nutritional, environmental risk factors to analyze cancer survival rates and to talk about how to explore or accurately perhaps how insurance mechanisms could be approached not only to bring financial support but also to help with cancer prevention and survivorship. Oh, that is the plan.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I guess you have quite a global view of the profession, given that you're Turkish, you've lived in Scotland, and you've lived in Australia too. So tell us about any differences that you've noticed in terms of the actuarial approach in those three regions.
I think what is funny is like not the differences but the similarities, perhaps. Because one thing that really genuinely surprised me over the years is how internationally connected the actual profession itself. The community is quite close knit, and people know each other. They are quite collegial in general, and I'm still regularly amazed by just seeing these random people or seemingly random people but connected in just ways beyond understanding or just like through conferences, research collaborations, or professional networks. So there is quite something. It makes me think perhaps the quantitative nature of our discipline is just shaping the culture quite strongly. Because across all these countries, what I realize is a pattern actuaries happen to be like analytical, evidence driven, and quite pragmatic people in their thinking. And at the same time, each country has their own actuarial flavor in their profession somehow. And there are these high ethical standards, professional standards throughout these actuarial societies. And almost always these societies are connected to wider groups like international actuarial societies, sort of reinforcing the culture. But what is changing is perhaps the communication styles in each country. But overall, I would say I find it just sort of quite remarkable to just see that similarities and how strong the shared professional identity itself in different countries.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Aisha, for such a insightful walk through your work and your career so far. Just before we finish, when it's the university holidays and you're not busy educating the next generation of actuarial scientists, what do you like doing to relax?
Well, work is quite demanding, but I love trying new things. That's it. I actually love music and dancing. It has been a real passion of mine, dancing itself in the last 13 years. Now I still keep going, especially salsa. I also really enjoy taking new challenges at the beginning of every year. So I like just being a beginner and out of my comfort zone now and again. And in last year, in 2025, my challenge was aerial acrobatics.
Oh, wow.
I'm still just failing. I'm still a beginner, but it is slowly getting there. And this year, actually, it is to become a more confident swimmer in Australia because there are these amazing beaches and surfers in Sydney. So it is just really impossible not to be motivated by them. So perhaps the following year, I can just jump into my surfing experience altogether.
Well, it sounds like you really enjoy embracing new challenges, both in your work and your private life. So, Aisha, we wish you all the best for the future, and thank you so much
Thank
for
you
joining
so
us.
much.
Thank you. It's our pleasure.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, Aisha. That was really interesting, and we do enjoy hearing from actuaries all around the world. Our last guest today is actuary Masimba Zata, who joins us here in the studio. Masimba, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to be here.
It's certainly good to have you. So let's start by talking a little bit about your career and your current role. You started at Moody's about 6 years ago as Director of Product Management, first in life insurance,
Correct.
now in P&C. So tell us a bit about your role and exactly what you do.
Thank you. So I work essentially lead the conception, development, and then launch and management of actuarial software products. And actually, I say actuarial software products. They are software products that are used by actuaries, but also used by professionals that are adjacent to actuaries in a workflow within an insurance company. So what that looks like day to day is, if it's just an idea, I'll come up with an idea, or I'll do some research to come up with an idea, go out to the market, speak to actuaries, exposure managers, others about whether there's, so any legs in the idea, make a business case for it internally at Moody's, and then support my software engineers and sales, marketing, everyone else to sort of bring this product to life. Essentially help make lives easier for actuaries, underwriters, brokers, and anyone else who sort of works within the insurance market.
Yeah, and you started out in pensions, you moved into insurance, and then later into technology. So tell us a bit about how you've developed and evolved as an actuary over the course of that 20 years.
Yeah, that's a good question. So you're right. I think I started off going back now just nearly 25 years actually in pensions. And I would say the big thing for me has always been to make my skill set agnostic to the the domain.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in the UK, our actual skill set tends to be defined by whether you're working life or pensions or GI
Mm-hmm.
or banking, whatever it might be. And I think without knowing it really, I think I'd always had this drive to make my skill set agnostic. And I think that's probably borne out by my Zimbabwean heritage. So, I'm of Zimbabwean heritage. And I think in Zimbabwe, even now, there are probably 2 qualified actuaries for every 1 million people.
Wow.
In Zimbabwe at the moment, right? So compare that to the UK, it's probably 200 actuaries for every 1 million people. So I don't think we, growing up and being sold the profession as something to do, the idea of specializing in one domain was never something that came across as something that I ever needed to do, because I always felt actuaries, and I'd seen actuaries, those who went before me in the Zimbabwean context, just doing what needed to be done, regardless of whether they qualified as a pensions actuary or a life actuary or a GI actuary. And I think that's sort of been my mindset. And I would say over the course of my career, that's been borne out. And that's why I've sort of never hesitated moving between domains if I felt there was an opportunity to move. That's not to say it's been easy to move between domains, because I do work in a mature market, so I have to really make a case for myself to move between domains. But I think that's probably where the drive has been from my perspective.
That's really good insight. You're not only an IFOA fellow, but also an academic fellow. You're a visiting actuarial lecturer at Queen Mary, part of the University of London. So does that sort of teaching work complement your day job, or is it, more of a sort of welcome contrast for you? And I guess what motivates you to do it?
Good question. Yeah. So maybe starting with the motivation. I think I'd always, for whatever reason, always had this urge to want to do some teaching. Okay, so I think that's probably the motivation, and I think it maybe comes from just having had really good teachers along the way. The reason I'm an actuary today is because my maths tutor back in Zimbabwe told me about the actuarial profession.
Right.
I would have never found out about it otherwise. So I've always had that urge to want to do teaching. So I think that's probably why I found myself doing some teaching at Queen Mary. What do I get out of it? I think there is I get to stand in front of a crowd on a regular basis, and that's something that I need as a product manager. I go out and speak to clients. I go and speak at conferences. So it's almost free training in many ways for my day job. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, because I work with students who are very keen to learn, but are actually at the forefront of where academia is now. When I give them an assignment, I get insights which I actually take back to my day job about how to do research or how to present or things like that. So I find it is actually quite complementary to what I do, and it's almost a two-way thing between myself and my students.
Yeah, it sounds pretty rewarding. You also give your time to the IFOA on council.
Yeah.
In what ways do you find that rewarding? And if you could evolve that in any specific way, what would it be?
So how I find it rewarding, a few ways actually. So I think the first one is being able to drive the vision of this profession. So I love this profession. And as part of council, I get to drive the vision. So our current vision, as it stands now, people go on the website, was introduced during my time on council. So I've been a part of that. I'm also as part of council, oversight, the group that oversees the implementation of the IFOA strategy, whether that's to do with education, whether that's to do with where we are sort of working within the UK and internationally. So again, just being able to sort of do that for a profession where I joined it just wanting to pass exams and have a career, I think that's quite rewarding as well. But the other thing, which I didn't expect at the time, is the friendships that I've made. So being on council is a group of 30 people, and 8 or 9 roll off each year. So you meet 8 or 9 new people each year. I've been on council for 5 years now, and I've made some really good friends, who I keep in touch with, both based in the UK and abroad. And that bit I wasn't expecting. I was expecting it to be a good way of giving back to the profession. I was expecting it to be a good way to learn and to grow my own career. But I found the relationships and the friendships that I've got from it to be very, very rewarding. And there's a second part as well, in terms of what I would do. Second part of your question, like what would I do different, or what would I want to see different? I don't think it's necessarily to do with council itself, but I think a big thing that I've seen in the 5 years I've been on council is the low turnout in council elections. Okay, so typically council elections, so members who voted me onto council and others, the turnout tends to be just over 10%. So 10, 11, 12% turnout, which I've always felt is really low engagement from our members. So if I had my time, and I think something that I would want to contribute to after I leave council. So I've been there 5 years. I think next summer would be my final of my 6 years. I would certainly be pushing for more engagement and getting that turnout to be higher, because then that means our council will be more representative of our members, and anything that's discussed and any vision that we take forward is going to be representative of our members.
Yeah, brilliant. for a while, you've also been part of the IFOA Foundation, becoming chair of the Board of Trustees more recently. So for those who might not know, tell us a little bit about what the foundation is and what it does.
Sure. Okay. So my involvement with the foundation actually came through initially because I was sitting on council, and the foundation needed a council-nominated trustee to come onto their board. So I went there, enjoyed it so much. I stepped down as a council-nominated trustee and just stood as a volunteer trustee. So that's how I then became chair of that trustee board. What do they do? Essentially, the foundation is a charity vehicle set up by the IFOA to allow members to give back to the community. And by community, I mean mainly the actuarial community or people who are keen to join the actuarial community. And I think this is quite an important thing, because what I've discovered, even in my own experience, is that it's expensive to train as an actuary unless you are able to go to university, unless you are employed by a company that's willing to pay your exam fees. Now, that's something that actually we take for granted in the UK, because by design, being an actuarial trainee typically comes with a student package and everything like that. That's not necessarily the case outside of the UK. So the foundation allows people like that, who want to train to become actuaries, the opportunity to do so and not be bound by financial hardship, or the inability to pay for those initial exams. I think once people get going and are sort of, I don't know, maybe 3-4 exams in, they're senior enough in their own careers to sort of pick themselves up. So that's a key part of it. And we've, over the 5-6 years we've been around, we've raised over £1 million from the actuarial community, and we operate all over the world. So in the UK, we're going to schools, evangelize about the profession. So you get students who've never heard about it, hearing about it. But abroad, we do, helping students to pay for their initial exams, do mentorship. Again, that's something that we can take for granted in the UK, but it's not necessarily available to sort of other people around the world. So yeah, I think it's a great initiative by the IFOA, and something that certainly, my term on that board is coming to an end this year. I'll really be keen to continue to support it afterwards, and hoping the IFOA as well continue to support it in the long term.
Yeah, that's really great. You said in a IFOA blog on being a chartered actuary, there are powerful technologies coming through, but they'll never replace us. So you sound pretty confident about the future of the profession.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your views on that, and whether you have any concerns at all about the profession moving forward.
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. So yes, I am confident. I think a key role of actuaries is applying judgment. Okay, and I think that's what separates a pure mathematician from an applied mathematician. Certainly within our context, we advise individuals, companies, pension funds, governments, and we need to do that. Yes, with quantitative expertise, but we need to apply judgment. So, and I think that is always going to be the remit of the human, whatever technology exists. So I think there will always be a role for us. Do I have some concerns? I think it's concern, but maybe opportunity as well. From the way I see it, I think what technology has done, and I speak as an actuary who works in technology, is that the doer, checker, reviewer route to becoming a qualified actuary and a qualified expert within the field has been disrupted. Okay, and what do I mean by that? I'm someone who works with AI on a daily basis. It's part of my job, and it's certainly in quite a lot of tasks, it's removed the doer role in the things that I do. So I can work with an AI agent to say, okay, draft me a first draft of this presentation, draft me a first draft of this report. And then it's not going to be perfect, but actually it's going to be there. I'm going to get a 22-page report, which has got most of the stuff I need. I'll then edit it and making sure that it's got what I need. But it's there. Okay. So I think as a profession, we just need to figure out, because we're always going to need a senior actuary to review what the AI agent has done. But how do we get a junior actuary to become a senior actuary when that junior role no longer exists in the same way that it did? Okay, so I think that's something that we need to to really think about and focus on as a profession. Now, the opportunities, and I said concern and opportunity. The opportunity is we broaden our reach and take ourselves out again of those domains that we've historically defined ourselves in, and actually think about the broader economy. Okay, because our skill set, and I'll use one example. We can produce financial projections going 5 years, 10 years into the future. We can use that in any industry. It doesn't have to be insurance. It can be automotive. It can be airlines. We can actually take this, skill set anywhere. And I think that's sort of where I see the opportunity of what technology has done to sort of just make us think a bit broader and see where we can take our skill set beyond what we've been working on, up to now.
Yes, brilliant insight. Lastly, we like to find out a little bit more about you as a person. Can you share an interest or something you like to do outside of your actuarial work?
Yeah, so probably a fun fact and a cliche fact. So cliche is running. So like many actuaries that I now know, I'm a keen runner. So I did my first marathon last year, and I plan to do more. Over the course of my lifetime. I don't intend to do too many, but because I don't think it's great for my knees. But I do intend to do more. A fun fact is, I think if I hadn't become an actuary, I probably would have become an electrician. I love to fix things. And the first thing I think I fixed, like when I was at high school, was a broken iron, and I needed to take it to high school. So I sort of found a way to fix it. It had been dispatched and it wasn't going to work. It was going to be thrown away. And I sort of fixed it, and it sort of built a lifetime of just fixing things. So if my washing machine breaks, for example, I will try to fix it, right? Before I call in an engineer, I will try to fix it. And I would say 7 times out of 10, maybe not quite 9 times out of 10, but 7 times out of 10, I get it working again. So yeah, I very much enjoy the, fixing stuff, electrical stuff in particular. So I think if I wasn't an actuary, I think electrician would probably have been something that I would have done instead. It's probably fun doing it as a side hustle, as opposed to or a hobby, if you like, as opposed to something professional. But I definitely do enjoy it.
Well, the electrician profession's loss is the actuarial profession's gain. So Masimba, thank you so much for joining us and telling us your stories.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So as ever, a huge thank you to all our guests this episode. We hope that you enjoyed listening. Do please spread the word and remember to subscribe on YouTube. We look forward to seeing you next time.